Welcome back to Space to Lead, the podcast where grassroots leadership takes centre stage. Leadership gets to be unshakable, and real people lead real change. I'm Gemma Rose Peacock, and this is the Unshakable Leaders 100 series, a celebration of grassroots leaders reclaiming their power and rewriting the rules of leadership. Every episode, we dive into stories of bold individuals who've leaned into uncertainty, owned their power, and learned to lead from the inside out. We unpack their wins, their stumbles, and the simple shifts, one question, one honest answer, one deliberate pause that transformed their story. Today, I'm honoured to introduce Neil Meekin. From council estate kid in Liverpool to army cadet, from living in Queenstown, Aotearoa, to creating societal change through entrepreneurship back in the UK. Neil's journey shows us that leadership isn't about just gaining a title. It's about confronting the patterns passed down through generations, setting courageous boundaries, and stepping fully into our own power. In our chat, you'll hear how Neil discovered family and systemic constellations to surface hidden family beliefs, why presence as a felt state builds trust faster than any strategy, and how shifting from the me to the we through co-leadership unlocks collective potential. Expect stories of digging into ancestral wisdom on a 5-day pilgrimage across Celtic lands, the boundary tweaks that freed him from burnout, and the co-leadership moves rewriting how teams and organisations thrive. Ready to plug into Neil's hard-won wisdom? Let's dive in and learn from unshakable leader number 3 in our series, Neil Meekin. Well, kia ora, Neil. Welcome to the Space to Lead podcast. It's great to have you here.
Kia ora, Gemma. Nice to be connected back to New Zealand, Aotearoa, and to be chatting to you in what will be your morning and my evening, 8 o'clock here.
Yes. So, can you start us off by introducing yourself to the listeners, who you are, where in the world do you call home, and anything that lights you up at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Neil Meekin, and I am based in a part of the UK called Merseyside. I'm originally from a city called Liverpool, which is quite famous here in England, but I've just moved over the other side of the River Mersey to a place called the Wirral. So I'm now based here so I can look back on the city where I was born. But
Mm,
I spent 7 years in New Zealand, and that's where obviously I got connected to you when I
yeah.
lived in Queenstown back in God, it's going back 4 years ago now.
Mm.
So yeah, it's good to be connected again. But yeah, what am I up to? So what's lighting me up at the moment? So I am really excited by constellations work that I'm doing at the moment
Mm.
because there's a real surge towards seeking change and transformation for individuals, and it's growing and growing, and people are sort of I say waking up's a bit of a cliche, but it's because of what's happening in the world, people want to
Mm.
change, and it's getting me really excited.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that in your eyes. So, for anyone who doesn't know what family constellations is, do you want to just tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so family constellations, it's almost a disservice to put family at the beginning, so we'll call it family and
Mm.
systemic constellations. So it's a method and a way of being able to bring into conscious awareness patterns, beliefs, values, any unconscious processes that are beyond the story that we tell ourselves. And through constellations, we can create a conscious awareness of those and mirror them back to us because there's a saying you can't change
Mm.
what you can't see. And so it's a really profound and powerful process of change and transformation as an individual, but you can use it in families, hence family constellations. Its origins come from a German psychotherapist called Bert Hellinger, who worked with families,
Oh,
but it's
yeah.
evolved and can be applied in business. So I've
Mm.
done it I've done it with startups, I've done it with social enterprises. You can do it with teams around like culture and diagnosing culture if there's if a culture is not quite right within a company, and so it's
Mm.
and use it in community organizations and social settings. And it's also being used in repairing and for peace. So for creating peace where there's been conflict, with say different towns or cities or communities through war. So it's got multiple applications. It's very powerful work.
Yeah, wow. Wow, that's incredible. So would you say this is your mission at the moment? Is this the impact that you're leading?
It is. It's a way of facilitating change
Mm,
and transformation. So
yeah.
it's definitely part of my toolkit, but
Yeah.
it's definitely at the forefront of me leading change using these tools for
Yeah.
sure because of
Yeah.
the results that I get.
Yeah.
It's profound. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, cool. And so let's talk a bit about your journey to leadership, what that really means for you and what that looked like. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, it's an ongoing process
Mm.
that is continually evolving. But I'd argue, like when I reflected on the question, when you sent the question before this session,
Yeah.
is that when I look back even to a child, like sort of 9, 10, 11 years old, I was given a lot of freedom
Mm.
um, in the council estate that I grew up in, or the social housing estate. And there was leadership qualities when I reflect back. I was very self-reliant, independent,
Mm.
and I'd often be at the forefront of like initiatives that would be happening, even in school. Secondary school, a little bit more, and then I was in like army cadets.
Oh
And
yeah.
like at the age of 14, 15, I was teaching other kids like certain skills like that be used in life.
Mm.
So it started there, and then as I've gone through my corporate career, I've naturally just found myself in leadership positions because I feel like I'm wired towards creating change. Like there's been so much change in my life that it's almost like when I've reflected on it, I'm naturally drawn to that. But
Mm.
not everybody is. So I'm a leader from that perspective, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
all the roles I've found myself in typically have been of that nature. But so it's almost like being leading by having a team, but also leading by example
Yeah. And
through change. Yeah.
yeah, I totally hear you on that. And would you say at the time of going through those different changes that you knew that your leadership was in action? Like, were you connected to your leadership in those moments early on? Did you know that you were a leader? Because I'm thinking of some of the listeners who, might have similar backgrounds and have similar circumstances where they've led change in their lives, but not seen it through the lens of their own leadership. So I'm just wondering if that came up for you, if you knew.
When I was younger, no,
Mm,
I was just doing it. You didn't really have the awareness or the language to say, okay, well, I'm a leader. But then when I went into
yeah.
army cadets, like for when I went into army cadets when I was 13, I was there until I was 17. It
Mm,
became very clear and I was given feedback. Okay, you've got natural leadership ability here. People naturally gravitate towards you and people trust
mm,
you. And so I was able then to give a framing of leadership, but not
mm.
just in context. I could see where it was rippling out into other areas of my life. And like army cadets, like if I go back, like that was a life that set the foundation, the skills and the teaching that you got at that age. Like it's really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's a funny thing, leadership, isn't it? Like,
In what way? In what way?
um, just some of the connotations that come along with it is like, so the whole concept of the unshakable leader, which you are number 3 in the Unshakable Leader series, is making leadership more accessible to people in thinking that we're reclaiming what leadership really means. Because my big thing on it is that leadership existed within each of us long before any boardroom existed, long before any corporate was built. So what would you say to someone who's, um, you know, going through lots of changes in their life or has been through lots of change in their life and isn't quite connected to themselves as a leader and the innate leadership within?
Yeah, great question. So one of the first things that I do, and I have done this before, so it's a
Hmm.
really useful example that you've offered some detail for, is I'd be reflecting back to them through certain types of questions for them to be able to see themselves in a metaphorical mirror and reinforcing back to them about certain aspects that I wouldn't call it leadership, but I would sort of
Mm.
almost get them to, let me change the language. I would facilitate them through them having an internal yes to what I'm offering as a mirror. And then to the point where, okay, you've shared this with me. These are classic characteristics of being a leader. So
Hmm.
they've talked themselves into it through just a reflective process because I've only got a subjective perception of them. So by using their own information
Yeah.
through really good questioning, you can mirror that back to them and it's empowering because then, oh, I can see myself and I can identify myself that because, okay,
Mm.
popular culture recognize these qualities as a leader. So that's how I do it and that's how I've done it before. So it's just mirroring,
Mirroring. Yeah. And I like
mirror
that.
them back to them.
Yeah.
Great questions and mirroring.
Hmm. Yeah, because as you say, that's we can go around telling people anything about themselves, but by getting them to go through their own internal process about it, it's more likely to have that aha moment. They're more likely to have that moment stick and that realization be clear.
Yeah, 100%. And I just
Yeah.
build on that a little bit because people have an internal model of who they are. And
Hmm.
if they don't internally identify as a leader and you say to them, oh no, you're definitely a leader. Like, look, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. But if their internal reference is, nah, I'm not a leader, I don't even know what that is, then you can
Yeah.
tell them to get blue in the face, and they're going to be like, nah, no,
Yeah.
no, they're going to dig their heels in and resist what you're saying. That's
Hmm.
why doing it the other way around is more powerful. So it's influencing with integrity.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did you get into this work at the work that you're doing at the moment with the family constellations?
Yeah, it's been a long journey that started. I'm 47 now, Gemma, and I could say it really started when I was 27, where there was a window open after a really difficult breakup in a relationship,
Hmm.
where I started to see patterns. So I started to see my family as a system and seeing these patterns going back into generationally. And over the years, I've realized that these patterns that were in my family system have held me back some way, being able to be in my full expression of who I am and my leadership and that manifested like insecurity or like ego
Hmm.
or addictions or various kinds of things. And so it got to a point in 2021 where when I fully got an opportunity to engage with the work, when I moved back from New Zealand because of family reasons to the UK, I started to get exposed to the work of constellations. And very quickly, it just like it opened up what we call it, widen the lens of what was possible and how I could
Hmm.
see myself. And my leadership really blossomed from me able to sort of see myself through constellations work.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because what it does is it shows you your own truth, but then through the constellations process, it allows you to see more truth and allow more in. And with that, you become more resourced and you can see a lot more because we go through life like this based on how we've been conditioned and how we've been taught and how we've been educated. But then the constellations work allows you to go like this and see so much
Hmm.
more. And then you can sort of see more leadership qualities come through because you trust them and you can see them. That makes sense?
Yeah, it really does. And what I'm thinking about, what came to mind just now is about how sometimes we can go through um, life with those things holding us back, whatever it is,
Mhm.
but we make it purely about us. And
Mhm.
sometimes, as you said, it's about, well, where does that thing that's holding us back show up in our family lineage? Like it doesn't just start with us. Um, So when you said patterns, I'm like, well, what are those what could be those patterns that are showing up for people, those barriers that are within themselves, but are also could be changed by family constellations work? Have you got examples of those?
I mean, it's confidential work, but I could give you sort of
Yeah.
obviously a sort of example. So a big one that I see a lot. So
Mm.
part of my wider consultancy work, I work a lot with entrepreneurs, and those
Yeah.
entrepreneurs might have a tech company or they might have a social enterprise. Most
Yeah.
of my work now is with people who are doing social or facilitating social and environmental change. And so I'm exposed to these people, especially who are, I would call them more activists rather than just building like an app for pets or something like that. These are people who are
Yeah.
really seeking change in the world. Now, what I'm
Mm.
seeing a pattern of is that these people who step into these positions are coming from a wounded place, especially men,
Mm.
where they have got a difficult relationship with the father.
Mm-hmm.
And the father might have been, say, when they were growing up, the father might have been absent physically.
Mm.
He might have left, or they might have been there physically, but emotionally unavailable and not supportive for the young man, or he might have been violent or controlling of the child who then becomes a man. So when he gets to be an adult, I've got to be careful not to swear, obviously, or use any profanities on the podcast, but it's almost like F you to the
Mm.
father. I won't
Mm-hmm.
give the fingers, and it's like a rejection of the father, and almost like competitive, but almost like an exclusion of like I don't need you, and I want to show you. But what
Mm.
that leads is like there's a motivation, and there's been some great changes in entrepreneurs and change makers that have come from this place, but it's not balanced, and so there's blind spots where they might have say people who they're leading that they're operating from like a wounded place where they can't see certain things and they'll push beyond the limits because they're
Mm.
so driven that they burn out.
Mm-hmm.
They suffer from mental health, get depressed, like burnout's prevalent. They just don't know
It
when to
is,
stop.
yeah.
There's no off switch. And so in terms of self-awareness and leadership in that respect, it's dangerous because
Mm.
then you're also in a position of authority. And so there's a
Mm-hmm.
lineage, there's a linkage, a correlation to that wound with the father. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it really does. And it makes me think of the change that could be done within the work that you do as well, in terms of those things that show up in leadership, like burnout, like micromanaging, all those, all the things that show up in ineffective leadership, how they could be solved by going into some of the work that you do. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Because that one of the things that I learned about myself,
Mm.
especially as a leader, and I'd see it show up quite subtly in some of my leadership roles. There was one particular role that I had in New Zealand where I was an innovation manager. I was managing a program for the government, and I was noticing my need to control certain aspects, and I was seeing it in other program managers
Mm.
on the program itself. I need to control the environment, and it's very
Mm.
subtle micromanaging, and it boils down to insecurity
Mm.
and feeling threatened by others, and there was a culture of that within the team, so you could see it. So
Mm.
culture plays a part in environment, but I could trace that back to like and the need to feel safe and in control through insecurity. So it's very much ego based. Do you know what I mean? So it was like
Hmm.
it's one of the things constellations it was able for me to bring an awareness to and change because you can't change what you can't see, Gemma. Do you know what I mean? That's how it
Yeah.
show up. That's how it show
Yeah.
up. So like so I've been able to move through that and realize, okay, first of all, why am I trying to control?
Mm.
Life is a mirror, Gemma, so you can orientate yourself to you as a leader through other people's behavior because you
Hmm.
recognize that how you feel and how you respond to them is about you, not about them. So life is constantly mirroring you back at you.
Hmm.
So if you can
100%.
approach it in that way, you don't need a coach or a mentor or anything. You do, they do help, they do really help. But you can see when you with that frame you can change
Yeah.
things from what's going on around you, with that awareness. Because
Yeah. And
it's
it,
like feel something's right. Go on, Gemma.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that it actually it strengthens your own ability to um be your own coach, guide, mentor, guru, whatever you want to call it, you know. Um, as much as I agree that not everyone needs to have a coach or a mentor all the time, but how do we strengthen those skill sets within people to be able to lead from a personal leadership perspective, And it sounds like this is one of them. And I love
Yeah,
how you touched on the parts of yourself that have had to grow and evolve, like noticing the micromanaging and need for control in the work environment. Has there been anything else that you've had to or noticed about your own leadership, personal or professional, that has had to grow and evolve?
great question. I always felt that after a certain point that I was a great listener and I was able to hold space and listen to people, especially as a leader.
Hmm.
But it wasn't as good as what I thought it was. And what I was able to recognize and cultivate more so through certain practices was presence.
Hmm.
Now, when you say presence, okay, you can understand it conceptually with the mind, but presence for me is a feeling and it's a state. And when you're present for someone, that other person can feel it,
Hmm.
and it creates trust and it creates safety. Because when
Hmm.
you're sitting in front of someone and say, I've got like a coach. Look, going back a couple of steps, I really advocate coaches and mentors. They're really, really important. So I don't want to say that not to happen. They're really, really important, and I've got them and I've had them. They're really
Yeah.
important. But there are other ways you can do it, but that enhances. Obviously, you can do yourself. But like when
Yeah.
you're someone, either a coach, a mentor, a teacher, a friend, a partner, um, a manager, if they're fully present with you, everything just sort of becomes really solid.
Hmm.
Your awareness develops, even if you're not the one who's present, it cultivates a nature's presence within you. And for you to be fully heard and to be fully seen, that's a really powerful thing when a leader is holding that space for you. Because I experienced it very rarely, except in fleeting moments with certain people. And I really felt the change. So I made it
Hmm.
my objective to become more present. And
Hmm.
it has it just almost like a ripple effect out to people around you. It's really potent. And you don't even have
Yeah.
to speak.
Yeah.
The
And
less
a
the less you talk, the
presence.
better.
Yeah, I agree. And that presence can be absolutely profound in leadership roles um, that presence is felt unconditionally, warts and all, you know?
Unconditionally is a great word.
Yeah. Yeah, because that way as a team, like I'm thinking immediately of a team scenario, but you could apply this to any kind of situation. But when that is active and when that is nurtured and allowed and made space for within a team, people can bring anything to the table. Mistakes can be aired and accepted and rectified. There becomes a lot more efficiency, trust, safety. And when people feel safe in those environments, it's a win-win, you know?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. There's two really, really powerful words you use there. One's trust,
Mm,
and the other one is safety. I'll add psychological safety to that,
yeah.
so I'll add
Mm,
psychological to it. And yeah, I mean, it's talked about and I've experienced it, but it's still for me quite rare. But I can't say
oh,
for
yeah.
every
Mm,
organization in the world, but it's still because now we're getting into the realm of culture.
mm, yes. Yeah, it also is quite rare for me too. Um, and I make big steps to ensure that I am that person within a team. It's not always easy, but yeah, trying to have that presence when it's lacking is quite a hat to wear, you know? So, would you say that there's any gaps in your leadership at the moment that you are um, working on, nurturing, or looking to like bridge the gap in your own leadership? Just I ask that question because um, a lot of a lot of people I'm speaking to at the moment are struggling to see themselves within leadership, within people of authority or leaders at the moment. And sometimes we can connect with them best because we can be real about how we show up and what we're working on and um, not necessarily appearing from perfection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting. I've just had a call just before this podcast, and we were talking about like the perception of and the fear of failing or being a
Mm,
failure or not performing. Yeah, and the effects that that can have. But going back to the original question is around what I'm moving
yeah.
towards. So for me as a leader, for me personally, I'm often being someone who is operating in small teams, or it's about the me and me being a personal leader for myself, but like being a bit of a lone wolf, Gemma, and realizing now that the scale of what's required for the change that we need to see in the world is that it's moving from the me to the we. Now I have been collaborative, but it's like my
Yeah.
leadership style and my ability now is to work in co-leadership with others, in collaboration. And it's interesting when you just use the word authority. For some reason, I've just had a bit of a reaction to it in
Oh,
me,
yeah.
which is information for me. Because I've got this thing of like this authority being hierarchical. I don't know what it is because like it's interesting as I'm talking about my leadership development has been around co-leadership. And I see that in my constellations work as well. And where my skill set stops, another one begins, but working with other leaders rather than managing or leading teams.
Mm,
It's like it's more flat and there's different
mm,
leaders operating together. So and learning how that can work and how that operates. So that's what I'm developing at the moment and actively seeking those opportunities out.
yeah. Yeah. I like that. Going from the I to the we.
The me
I'm
to the
doing the
we.
same. Oh yeah, me to the we. That's even better. Which is why this podcast exists, because I'm doing the exact same. Quite often I find people on similar lines of work, regardless of the modality, are we're working in silos a lot of the time, and I see what you are saying, the impact and the reach and the effectiveness of becoming the we and moving into those spaces. Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
particular person who I'll name who has been influential on my life and my leadership, which might be useful for people who might be
Mm.
listening to your podcast. And his name is Otto Scharmer.
Mm.
So Otto Scharmer is he's German by birth, um, but he is a professor at MIT in America. But he has got this methodology and this framework called Theory, but
Mm.
it's systems based leadership. And he talks about from the me to the way, from ego to eco. And he's had a profound influence on my life. So just some of the things we're talking about at this particular time, you maybe put it in the show notes or share. But
Yeah,
Otto Armour
I
is a
will.
really, really important person to connect into and follow his work because he's really leading this space. Yeah, really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Thanks for sharing that. Um, and so you know how we were talking a minute ago about authority, and I just want to
Yes.
rewind to that and the hierarchy, and then you went like this with the flat. Um, do you think that leadership becoming less hierarchical is part of us reclaiming how we do and see leadership at the moment?
Oh, that's a big question. That's a big
I know.
question.
Go with it where you want.
Okay, let me just feel into it and
Yeah.
just feel what comes up for me.
Hmm.
Because it's certainly been inspired by certain modes of thinking, and I suppose I'm being influenced by more indigenous forms of organizing.
Yeah.
And there's a book that was given to me, or I was made aware of that I bought a copy. So back in April, I was invited to Rotorua at the National Family Constellations conference that was running there to run workshop.
Choice.
And yeah, it was amazing. But there was an Australian facilitator there, and she'd been doing some work with this guy called Greg Campbell, and he'd spent 30 years in the Pilbara. It might have been the Kimberley region in northwest Australia with the Aboriginal community. And he wrote a book called The Great Reset. And they're looking at more indigenous ways of organizing and leadership. And you look at Native American, or you look at Celtic, the traditional Celtic of our lands, of how tribes were managed, and how say Native Americans, or like in South America, how they're organized, and how it's a lot more fluid and connected.
Mm,
It's very emergent. So
mm,
like you cannot control nature. So you have like these looser structures that there is some form of structure, but it's all like it's more like a systems based rather than a linear based, and you working with what phenomenologically, that's a big word, phenomenologically arises in the moment, and you respond to it in a
mm-hmm.
very dynamic way. Don't use the word agile because it's been done to death, but like
Yeah.
you be able to respond in a particular way. Whereas if I think about like the military, which is also changing interestingly, and I think of fire and emergency in New Zealand too. I did some work where it's a very command and control model. Now, where there's an event where there's like a big fire, then it's definitely needed in that respect. But in a general sense, yeah, I'm more interested in more indigenous forms of organising, and I'm curious about how Maori would do that in a more traditional sense, which I'm not
Yeah.
aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I'm really interested in um re-indigenization as a concept, as a way of living and being. And I
Interesting.
yeah, I've just to riff a bit on that aspect, because yeah, it's a big theme in my life at the moment, where I am, noticing the ways in which I've been raised, and any kind of like conditioning that's kind of come up, and how I've gravitated towards Indigenous cultures wherever I've been, Australia,
Interesting.
here in New Zealand, obviously, and learning and connecting to those ways of the cult of the country that I'm in, the First Nations culture of any country I'm in, and it actually points me back to my own in terms of the Celtic lineage, because
Mm,
if I'm learning about the Maramataka in Māori with
the
the
moon.
lunar calendar or whatever, and then actually pointed back to, well, that existed in our lands long before any other concept came in of like the different calendars. So I'm interested to know, just briefly, if you don't mind, about like where, because I noticed, I think it was something you shared recently about a pilgrimage that you went back to Ireland and you reconnected um, in that way. So is there anything that you feel kind of nudged to share about that experience, or are the original ways of our lands in terms of leadership?
Yeah, it's an excellent question because it also connects me back to New Zealand. So I've got a little story I can
Yeah.
tell you just to
Oh,
give you a
great.
little bit of
Go
background.
for it.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's really interesting where you're at in yourself, Gemma, and I wasn't aware of this, what you're sharing, and it's really got me curious. So when I moved to New Zealand in 2014. 2016, there was the Social Enterprise World Conference. It just happened to be in Christchurch. So I went, and it was amazing. And I got chatting to a young Maori guy. He must have
Mm,
been 19, 20. and we were just sharing different ideas. And I was like, tell me more. Like, I'd love to learn about like the culture and like the philosophy and the spirituality and the connection to land.
Yeah.
And he went, yeah, Neil, that's great, and I really respect you for wanting to know that. But what's yours?
Hmm.
Like, what's your waka papa?
I've had the
Like,
same.
where's your waka? Where that?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. And I knew I had ancestry in Ireland, so that set me on a journey, and that's where constellations has also come in as well. So fast forward, that was 2016. So fast forward to 2025. So when I moved back for family reasons, I'm moving back to New Zealand. Thankfully, yeah, like I
Woohoo!
really
How
miss New
lucky are
Zealand.
we?
I'm coming back the end of the year, start of next year. But like when I first went back in 2021, I always said that if I ever, because it was never then intended to go back, if I ever go back to the UK for whatever reason, I will go really deep into my ancestry, where I came from, the old ways. And I have done so. The 4 years I've been back, probably a year of those 4 years has been spent in Ireland. And it's not just Ireland, because I've also, when I've done my DNA, I've got like Scottish and I've got Welsh. So there's
Me too.
Celtic blood running through my
Mm.
veins. Yeah, similar. And so what's really fascinating is what I found is that when you set foot on that land, something in you comes alive, like something in your cellular memory, in your DNA. Like there's a remembering, and you talk about like
Yeah, there is.
reclamation.
Mm.
There's a reclamation and there's a remembering, and through the remembering, it's like you're almost. It sounds a little bit maybe woo-woo for maybe people who maybe not familiar, but you start to get like almost like downloads and remembering of like things, and like synchronicity starts to happen. Like Ireland, when I go to Ireland, like it's magical what unfolds, the connections that I make, the knowledge that I learn, the people that I meet, how I feel on the land. It's like a flower blossom. It's profound. So what it's led me to is, okay, you've got ancient culture, you've got Neolithic culture, and we've got all these stone circles and Neolithic
Mm.
tombs. These are 5, 6,000 years old on the UK, Joanna. It's like,
Yeah,
you've
it's
got like the famous
crazy.
ones like Stonehenge. It's crazy. And you can go to these places and energetically they're really powerful. But like part of this Celtic culture, what you talked about, I've got a belief, Gemma, is that like Celtic culture come from Central Europe, Jamie. There was a migration. So you get like a lot of Celtic cultures. You've got like the traditional ones where you've got like Scottish, Irish, Welsh, Cornwall. Then you've got Brittany and France, and then you've got like Galicia in Spain and Portugal. So you've still got like
Mm.
Celtic influence in Ireland, man. But then when the Romans invaded, and around 68 AD, they wiped out Celtic culture. Like there's in Anglesey in Wales, it was the last stronghold of the Druids. So all the priestly class, all the knowledge and all the culture was held
Mm.
in Anglesey, and the Romans came and wiped it all out. So you could argue like that split, that loss happened at that particular
Hmm.
point, and we can still see the effects of Romanized culture in the Western world to this day.
Hmm.
So that's why, like, I've gone back to that period pre-Roman to reconnect into those ways. And so I did a pilgrimage
Wow.
from Liverpool. I walked from Liverpool to Anglesey. It was 90 miles, took me 5 days, and I arrived in time for summer solstice. Because in Anglesey, it's a place called Brinkethley D, and it's a 5,500-year-old, almost like it's a tomb. And the way it's constructed, when the sun rises on the summer solstice, the sun comes right through into the passage.
Hmm.
And so walking there as a way I'm getting goosebumps as I'm talking about this. To walk there, I arrived on the Friday night, the summer solstice on the Saturday morning. I arrived, it was stunning. Woke up in the morning at 3:45, and there was a modern form of druidry. There was druids everywhere, all in gowns, and there was a big ceremony. And there was about
Wow.
100 people there, of all people, who were looking to reclaim the
Hmm.
culture that was lost, the Celtic culture. And so there's a renaissance, Gemma. So that's why I wanted
Yeah.
to tell you this, to share the story, because that's very much where I am at. And I feel so motivated. It's like reclaiming our ways from our lands because we've been almost like dispossessed. And to be
Yeah.
shameful of the fact that we're English or
Yeah.
Scottish or Welsh or Irish through colonization. So
Yeah.
it's like, so when we reclaim those old ways, we're also reclaiming ourselves. And when we reclaim ourselves, we become more sovereign and we have more agency. And that's what I'm really feeling as a leader is by stepping into this. I feel really strong, Gemma, in my
Mm-hmm.
stance, where I stand. And I can trace that back to that young Maori kid in
Mm.
2016
Good on him.
being provocative and for me to be
Yeah.
able to like not be able to respond. So
Yeah.
thank you for letting me share that because I just really feel
No, thank you. Mm.
strong when I share it because it's such a powerful story. And there's been many teachers who've come along the way, both Maori, um, back in my land, like in America, there's been really good teachers that have helped support me through this journey.
Yeah. And what leadership from that young Māori dude? 19, did you say?
He was 19.
Yeah. Love
He had
that.
mana. He had mana and I
Yeah.
felt it.
Yeah.
So I want to touch on just one more thing because I'm doing a lot
Yeah,
of
go for
talking
it.
and I'm stealing a lot of oxygen, but it's an important thing to note when we talk about leaders. My belief and my experience, and I'd like to be proven wrong or shown another way. But when we talk about leadership, we've lost our traditional elders within our Western industrialized society. Now, the elders were the leaders who passed down the knowledge through rites of passage, both men and
Hmm.
women, that then they became the leaders and they carried the torch of the knowledge and the wisdom and the power. And that has been severed for me in Western
Hmm.
culture. And we've
Hmm.
got people in the general population floundering and lost and
Hmm.
not in the power because of it. Does that make sense? Does that
Yes,
resonate with you?
really does. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Do you
I
want to say a little bit more
think,
about that?
sorry?
Do you want to say a little bit more about that from your
Oh,
perspective? Because I'm
yeah.
curious.
I was just going to touch on the fact that how in a lot of Western cultures at the moment, um, all these tools, wonderful tools, that exist to, the personal development world that is, popping off left, right, and center for a good reason, because people are searching, people are
Mm.
looking for something. And I believe the root of that is what you just touched on. It's reclaiming the lineage, reconnecting to people of a similar journey, like you and I, because I also didn't know the depths of what you were exploring as well. But when we are on that journey, or when we are standing on those lands and reconnecting to what it means to be Celtic or whatever, um, that in itself is a powerful leadership move, like that in itself makes us whole. So as much as a lot of these tools that are available, which I'm very grateful for, they've all pointed me back to this, you know.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, yeah, it really is awesome. And it's a bit of a journey, hey, you know? Yeah,
It's the work, Gemma. It's the
yeah,
work. Um, it's not for the faint-hearted. It takes courage, and but it's a non-negotiable, and it has to happen.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
once you start taking those steps, the door closes behind you, and you can't go back, and you've got to continue. And this is again, it's that leadership. It's so important.
Yeah, I
It's
had a similar experience here. Um, Gotta love the Māori, hey? And
yeah.
I was learning, um, I was working in a role up in Te Awaroa, Helensville, in social services.
Oh yeah.
And we were learning Te Reo Māori, and my teacher, my kaiko at the time, said, "Look, Gemma, it's wonderful that you are so driven to learn our language, while you're on these lands, while you call this home, while you're working with our people." And he was like, "But do you know your own?" And my
Hmm.
chest just like my heart sunk. And I was just like, oh God, no, I don't. And from then on, I have, and I'm still learning Te Reo Māori because I'm here, right? This is where I call home at the moment. But I went on a journey. Um, I think it was yeah, maybe 18 months ago. I went back to Scotland for about 5 months, and my dad and I went on a bit of a pilgrimage to the Outer Hebrides and the West Coast because I'm of Campbell, McKellar, um, Whakapapa, like lineage. And so we went via our ancestral lands to the Outer Hebrides. And, out there, they are speaking Gaelic, like, you know. And one lady was appalled that I was trying to order my coffee in English, and it was like looking at me because she could tell I was Scottish. And I just felt this moment of know where you are, learn these people are out here speaking Gaelic and keeping it alive, And from then on, I joined Duolingo and started to learn Gaelic, which I can read quite well. I'm not very good at speaking it at the moment, but it just got me thinking about how if we don't take responsibility while we're living and breathing now to reconnect and reclaim parts of our culture that really need us, then we will lose it. So I see it as much as we need to take ownership for the way things are and do something about it. Um, so yeah, I thought I'd just share that wee story since we're sharing stories.
No, it's really beautiful.
Yeah,
And I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. I don't want to flip it
go
to
for
feel
it.
like I'm interviewing you, but it's
No,
like,
no, go for it. Go where it needs to go.
because it's really important is that you touched on, you said some great words, and I just want to just pull on them a little bit. But like as a leader, it's responsibility.
Mm,
Responsibility is key in knowing that you've got agency and to be able to be responsible
mm,
to be and to act. It's fascinating you're talking about like the Outer Hebrides because I'm going to Skye, Lewis, and Harris at the start of September as part of my own journey up to those parts. And like you say, the language that I mean, let's just go back. That landscape up there is absolutely mind blowing. People don't
wild.
realize about the Outer Hebrides, as you know. So to be able to speak the language now, I've spent a lot of time in Ireland and there's an amazing man called Manco Magan, who is like a national treasure, who's really at the forefront of this cultural renaissance of, he's got a book called 32 Words of Field, and it's how like the Gaelic language has got so much more expression to it, and
Yeah,
how it's interlinked with like customs and being able to read the land. And how fascinating that you had to, I don't mean you had to, but you chose to go to New Zealand. And it
I
was only
did,
by
yeah.
being in New Zealand that you were able to reconnect
Hmm.
Aotearoa, let's call it. You were able to then be catalyzed to reconnect
Hmm.
back to
100%.
Scotland. How interesting.
Yeah, there's
For
something
me, the
here that
same.
does that. There's something here on these lands that does that to people, especially also here in Tahuna. Like the people that gravitate towards living down here in Queenstown, um, yeah, I don't know if I've quite got the words for it, but
Try.
something transformational. Yeah, people are here for a reason, you know,
Yeah.
and quite quickly, once that reason is met, move on. That's why it's so transient. I mean, it's transient because of tourism, sure, but
Tourism.
it's transient in a different way, on a deeper level, um, which I think is more of a feeling thing for me. Um, yeah, but there's something that happens down here, little end of
Yeah,
the world.
but I'm gonna build on it a little bit because there'll be people who'll be listening to this who know me here in the UK, and
Yeah,
I lived in where you are. I lived in
yeah.
Queenstown for a year. It's by accident, pure or not so, that I found myself in Queenstown.
Hmm.
That's a whole other remarkable story to with COVID. But you're right. There was a
Hmm.
real, I mean, I'd argue that Wanaka, which is the next town across,
Yeah.
is similar. Is that people used to talk about the Remarkables, which is the mountain range in Queenstown. there's just something energetic, maybe in the rocks or in the crystals of of the mountains, that there's an energy. And because when I lived there during COVID, there was hardly any tourism. It
Mm.
meant there was more ability to be able to feel the land because it's not so overrun and busy with jets, and it was so busy. And you're right, there's something really powerful. And then when you go down to Glenorchy and then down to Paradise, man, and the way that the geography is
Mm.
facilitates something. And don't forget, I mean, that people don't realize as well that New Zealand, the landmass is formed from two tectonic plates rubbing together. That is constantly in motion. I mean, how many earthquakes? If you go
Yeah,
onto
it
GeoNet, which is the
rubbed
app,
together the other night.
oh
I'm
yeah,
in a
they rub
tiny house
together.
and we were like this.
There's shakes every day, but like
Yeah.
that has like a like geopathic, it creates an energy, like facilitates transformation. But oh God, I'm just getting excited because I know that like I'm ready to, yeah, I'm looking forward to coming
Yeah,
back. Queenstown is a special place to call
it really
home.
is. Yeah, and it was this interesting because after the little shake that we had the other day,
Oh yeah,
I mean it was quite a jolt actually. It wasn't a shake. Very short and sharp. Um a lot of people after that the next day when I was out in the community were like, "Oh, did you feel last night?" Well, I heard
it's
it
all one
before
point.
felt it, you know. But a lot of people said to me, "Oh, I felt like we needed a good shake up. You know, we needed because a lot's happened in this community in the last 4 months. Especially in the Maori community, we've had quite a bit of loss.
Okay.
And it just felt like a lot of people were saying, "Oh yeah, we need to do this," you know, and um that was connected to the jolt we had the other night and being like, "Oh, maybe, that was us getting a bit of the shake up we need, without it being disastrous." It was like a wake up, like let's change the vibe kind of thing. Um, but yeah, it's interesting how we can disregard what the land is telling us. And I just felt the next day after that, we got a bit of a reconnection of like what that could mean and what that could be doing for us, because we often think that we're it and we've got all the power and the control, but we really don't, you know?
Yeah, it's a really useful perception, Gemma, of what you've just said there, and that comes
Mm.
very naturally to the likes of Maori about orientating yourself to the land and the land actually speaking and being able to receive those messages and being able to interpret meaning
Yeah.
from that. Because I remember in Wellington back in 2016, there was a 7.5 earthquake, and when your
Wow.
whole house is almost coming down for 90 seconds, you realize that you're a very small part of something much bigger. So it's really humbling.
Yeah. Yeah. And just while we're talking about um jolts and earthquakes, and I'm kind of like, oh, unshakable leader. How funny is that, you know?
There you go. Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know if we've really discussed the concept of I don't think I've discussed it with you really in depth about where I'm going with the unshakable leader and what it means, but really in a nutshell, from my perspective, but I always like to know what the guests and who I'm interviewing and who I'm speaking to, what comes up for them when I talk about it. From my perspective, the unshakable leader concept was born from um, the idea of being able to intervene on ourselves when things are going in a direction that perhaps isn't aligned with where we want to go, or we're seeing things within how we operate, and we want to redirect that. So it's taking the lead on our leadership, if you know what I mean. And that comes from things that are prevalent at the moment: burnout, all the stuff, the hurdles that are ineffective. But how can we, one, notice them and act? do something about it, and it comes from my experience of having burnt out quite a few times and noticing where I didn't get into my communication, didn't set boundaries, didn't know how to regulate my nervous system, all the things that are leadership skills that if we develop, we can become unshakable. And it's not from a stance of we've to be perfect leaders, but how can we um, be a bit more robust in how we operate personally and professionally. So my question really for you is, what does an unshakable leader mean to you? And how is it showing up? How is being an unshakable leader, which I've told you are because you're here, number three,
Yeah.
how does that show up for you?
Well, I'm going to just build on some of the things that you just shared about what you were saying about like nervous system regulation.
Yeah.
Like I often say to like my clients we will work with is that if there's two things, and we can put it in the context of leadership, there's two things that will change your life right now. Simple but not easy. Setting clear boundaries with yourself internally and with others, and saying
Yeah.
and saying no more without feeling guilt or shame.
Mm.
Just doing those two things have a profound effect on people's lives, like profound. So for me as a leader, like building on what you said, those two things are massive. Another two things which I'll talk about, which I'll touch on for me, building on what you said, is cultivating self-awareness
Mm.
of oneself, but being in community.
Mm.
So you need a tribe, like you can that like I said before, being a bit of a lone wolf. We need to be in community.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like by being in community with other people who we trust, who are other leaders, who are also doing work on themselves and also showing up, you can orientate yourself to yourself
Mm.
through being with other people who also will hold you accountable. Now we can hold ourselves to account as well, but again, it
Not
goes
as
back.
good as how other people can.
No, but that's why it's going from the me,
Mm.
bringing more of the we in. So
Yeah.
how we are an individual within a community. Now I don't mean like a community like Queenstown Hill community or like Frankton. I don't mean that type of community, but a community of practitioners and leaders who are trustworthy. It's like a brain's trust, who can mirror you back at you, support you, who you can trust. So that's what I do in terms of building on top of what you already said about like nervous system regulation. For to be
Yeah.
unshakable, we need to be together.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Makes
agree.
sense.
Yeah.
You could say a team, but like collaborators. Yeah.
Yeah. And people who feel like-minded and really listen and understand of what needs you're asking for others to um help you meet or meet for you, you know,
Yeah,
in
thank you for this
community.
question. Yeah, thank you for this question because it's something's just dropped for me
Oh,
in some of my some of the things I've been thinking about. Just
oh,
a
great.
really strong feelings just dropped into my body. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome. So if people walk away with one thing, I mean, I always say people, maybe I need to change this question actually, because people walk away with so many things from these episodes and these conversations. But if people were to walk away with one thing from your story, what would you want them to take away?
Learn how to set clear boundaries and understand where you're not setting clear boundaries, where that root of that comes from within your family system.
Yes, oh, love that. Yeah.
And
Whew,
that, and
powerful.
just start there. Start
Yeah.
there, and you
Start
it'll
there.
it'll be so it's like that point of most leverage
Mm,
from if you pull the lever, what's going to give you the most leverage, and that'd be for me, it'd be that,
mm. Yeah, so find where the boundaries are needed and implement them via
and find out
family
and find
constellations.
yeah, well, not the family
Yeah,
constellation, but find out what put them in place, but then find out where the root of those lack
where
of
the root
boundaries.
is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oof, love that. So, where can people find you, Neil, if they want to connect with you or learn more about who you are and what you do? Is there somewhere we can direct people to?
Yeah, well, you can maybe send it, put in the show notes. I'm on all
Yeah,
social
I
media
will.
platforms, the main ones, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I post a lot of content on Facebook and Instagram. We can find about some of my philosophy, some ideas around constellations work, change, transformation. So I post a lot and share a lot of content, where my workshops are. I've actually got a 4-week online workshop, a cohort that's happening in August that people might be interested in. That could still, I've actually got someone from New Zealand coming on it already. So it's just that it'd be an early morning, but there'd be maybe something for people to join in the Southern
Cool.
Hemisphere. So I'll
Oh,
give you
that's great.
all the
So
bits.
are
Yeah,
you just Neil Meekin on those platforms or yeah, yeah,
I am.
yeah. And you're
Thankfully, there's
and sorry, you're what was the name of your business?
the pool of life.
Yeah, the Pool of Life. Mm, I love that.
So that's based on based on a dream that a famous psychologist, Carl Jung,
Mm.
Jung, he's a protege of Sigmund Freud. He had a dream about Liverpool, and which is my city, my birth. And he said Liverpool is the pool of life. So that's
Oh,
influenced sort of my
wow. That's
the
beautiful.
correlation. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. It's been absolutely amazing to just, yes, ask you the questions, but also go with where the conversation was going and needed to go. So, yeah, I really appreciate your flexibility with just going with the flow.
No, thank you, and just reciprocate it back at you. It's how old are you now, Gemma?
I am 35.
35. Just where you are in your life, heeding the call of remembering and reclaiming and going back to your Celtic roots and how you're stepping up and bringing this podcast. It's important leadership. So I just want to
Mm,
really respect you for that, Gemma, and just, if I can support you in any way and just, yeah, keep going. That's important
yeah.
work.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's awesome.